That's how my morning's been. I'm really excited to present our next speaker, Chris Knox. Chris is an artist, a graphic novelist, and a dedicated unschooling parent. His own schooling struggles shaped his belief in self-directed learning, leading him to unschool his children, Story and Marin. In Anecdotal Dad, he shares his journey, insights, and lessons learned along the way. Let's give him a warm welcome. Woo!
Just gonna hold this. Oh, wow. Okay, so thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate seeing you. Told myself I was going to be in bed by 9:30 last night. That did not happen. I've just prepared this little thing I want to read to you. Should be about 45 minutes or so. Hello, and thank you for coming here today to listen to my talk about my family's journey through unschooling, how it has affected my life in so many wonderful ways. Today I would like to tell you about my school experience and how it led me to unschool our own children, what some of my favorite parts of living an unschooling life are, and the struggles and uncertainty I've experienced while our family navigates a road less traveled. So, my name is Chris Knox. I live in Portland, Oregon with my beautiful wife, Katie, and our two kids, Astoria, who is 9, and Marin, who is 7, if you can believe that. I contribute to our family financially by driving the bus in Portland, but in my heart, I am an artist. I have always been. I've been considered an artist by my community ever since I can remember. It was the one thing in elementary school that kept me out of trouble. It granted me positive attention, and so because of that, I kept doing it. When I was 4 or 5, my mom and I lived with another single mom, and they were trying to figure out who had drawn all over the walls of their apartment. And my mom said, well, how do you know it wasn't Shane who did this? And she said, well, my kid can't draw that well. So being an artist has always been a part of me. I'm a multidisciplinary craftsman. Over the last few years, I've explored a wide variety of mediums, from sculpture and ceramics to performance and video. For the last decade, I've been focusing on comics. I write a daily called Honored Citizen, starring this little derp I call Batman Boy, who is the lower torso of Batman's upside down head for some reason. Honored Citizen is about social structures and education and the working class. Sometimes. This one is pretty on point today, so I'll read it to you real quick. So here's this, overlord Batman's boy's drawing. Say, champ, you're really good at that. Thanks, I like to do it. Well, time to do this now. He puts them in front of these, but I don't like doing this. He's like, well, you can't just draw all the time. So later, Batman boys, in front of these gatekeepers showing them his drawings, and they're like, yeah, man, your work just isn't there yet. If only I had applied myself. Nice. So currently I'm working on this graphic novel, a story about this kid Russ who is tormented by the phantom of his 5th grade teacher, Judy Turnkey. And I also design games. I'm on the verge of completing my first role-playing game called Guardrail. And Marin and I will be hosting a fun shop this year, playing a game that we designed called Sir Crab Part 2.
Do you know what that is?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So feel free to stop by and check that out if you can. We'd love to see you. And you can check out more of my work here if you want to. Okay. So that's a lot about me. And this is my family. We are... Let's see, water. We are all artists in our family, and we value relationships and connection over most things. Building community and strong family ties is, we believe, essential to a peaceful, fulfilling, and simple life. We love camping and being in nature, board games and video games with friends, meals and birthday celebrations with family. We search for life paths that are simple but not always easy. Katie is at home with the kids. She is a seamstress, clothing designer, and artist. She does the heavy lifting of our life. She cooks most of our meals, does bedtime, schedules our flights, does the budget, finds the best deals on groceries, refuses to buy anything new, and seems to pull clothes out of thin air for our kids. She works much harder than I do. Loves me more fiercely and completely than anyone ever has, and is on a never-ending quest of self-discovery. She is a gift. Our daughter, Astoria, who we call Story, has been dressing in black a lot lately, has a lifelong admiration for strong women like Lady Gaga and Taylor Swift, Wednesday Addams, and Princess Mononoke. She is finding her voice and independence in her community and finds it perfectly acceptable to draw designs on her face with markers before going out. She has this laugh that erupts like a cannon that makes me smile no matter how I am feeling. She laughs like she lives, not considering what others might think. Story and I talk a lot about social structures, world leaders, concepts of good and evil. She is a wonder. And Marin is our youngest. He has a wealth of knowledge of all beasts, real and imaginary. He loves to act out creatures and uses up every second of our time we are able to give him. He loves YouTube and Roblox. Marin and I talk a lot about D&D monsters and Pokemon. Yes, I do. I missed them. Thanks so much. My cues didn't show up. He's the first to tell me how it could have been worse, and he's the first to tell me how I could have done it better. He is a force. Okay, so my schooling experience. In order for me to talk about unschooling in our life, I'd like to share with you a little about my own schooling experience, because my school experience and Katie's school experience had to exist in such a way to make us receptive to the idea of unschooling. Had our experience been more positive, I don't know if we ever could have arrived at unschooling today. I started school in rural Maine in 1984, and I don't think I ever really understood why I was there. I mean, I knew that they were going to teach me stuff that I was going to do later on, but I went to see my friends and to have fun. I loved seeing all the other kids. I loved running around the classroom. I loved pretending to be a dog for Chrissy Taylor so she would touch me. I loved drawing monsters for the other kids and then pretending to be them at recess. I loved making all sorts of animal noises. Sometimes I would become so overcome with joy, I just had to jump out of my seat or pick somebody up and shake, whoa! So of course they labeled me as disruptive and even better slapped me with an ADHD diagnosis early on. Sweet, now they had options. I was observed by experts who promptly put me on a regimen of Ritalin, problem solved. But much to the chagrin of the administration, thankfully, the Ritalin was short-lived. My mom seeing the drastic personality shift. By third grade, I was taken off it, which proved to be a major inconvenience to my third grade teacher, Mrs. Ford. Mrs. Ford. I'm working through some stuff, guys. Mrs. Ford was at the time known for being of the old school. What she was in reality was a bully and an abuser. The only thing I can remember her teaching me was the importance of staying in your seat or else. And no matter how many times I told myself I was going to be good today, I still found myself being the recipient of Mrs. Ford's or else's. I just had more fun when people were looking at me, and they seemed to be having more fun as well. I'm sure from Mrs. Ford's perspective, I made her job quite difficult, but my memory of that year tells me I wasn't doing anything wrong, which I wasn't. I was just a kid who was trapped in a place that wouldn't allow him to be himself. Sometimes I would find myself on the other side of the classroom with really no idea how I got there. Oops, must have wandered out of my seat again. Mrs. Ford had no problem showing me where I was supposed to be. third grade is such an important year, they said to me over and over again. I guess what they meant by that was this was the year they showed you what teachers were really like. Before this, I was having a great time, but all of a sudden it seemed school could be a cold, scary, and dangerous place. I mean, yeah, there were kids you had to watch out for, especially those two meatheads from Clifton, but I didn't know that teachers could be dangerous too. So the summer of my 4th grade year, I spent praying to God that I would get into Mr. Bedley's class, who was kind and sweet and respected, and thus begin a long career of teacher hot potato. Summer's over, son. Roll those dice and see who you get. By 6th grade, my ability to sit and listen had improved greatly. It would appear that school had accomplished its job. My friend Adam, who I had known since 2nd grade, once said, "You know, I think you're really starting to grow up. You don't grab and shake me nearly as much as you used to." And all this without the use of stimulants. But there were always going to be teachers and staff who found my behavior problematic or disturbing. I didn't need to be running all over the place, not following instructions to gain raised eyebrows or looks of disgust from faculty and staff. Whether it was my sense of humor, my drawings, or I don't know, I've never really been too sure what else, to be honest. I think if that little kid had known exactly what made some people not like him, he would have changed it early on. In 8th grade, I landed the role of the Beast in our production of Beauty and the Beast and knocked their socks off. It was the most successful I'd ever been in school. I fell in love for the first time that year. I met teachers involved in the show who really saw me as a lovable person. It felt like I had finally found a home in school. The behaviors that I was critiqued for and told needed to be changed were now celebrated and encouraged. "You're not being loud enough, Chris," or "Really throw that kid across the stage." I think I can do that. But one thing I did not expect was how the opinion of the teachers who were so concerned with me making animal noises in class and exhibiting a strange and disturbing sense of humor were now saying, "I never knew you had talent." In my hometown, middle school is 5th to 8th grade. On this one, I think I may have, maybe not. Just as I was experiencing my first real success in school, I was preparing to transfer to a whole new one. Now, this is nothing new to most of you, I'm sure. All of us have to transfer from one school to another a few times in our lives, but for me, as I've reflected on this over the years, I have come to believe it was a devastating and life-altering event. My options for high school were limited. I could go to Brewer High, where the bullies of my early middle school now resided, who I was convinced were lying in wait for their chance to resume their long tradition of tormenting me. The other option was John Baptist, a prep school that had GPA threshold and interview process that I had absolutely no chance of getting into because of my preference for making comics for my friends, pretending when I wasn't supposed to, and making people laugh over getting good grades. Audrey Swanton was the director of our play. She was instrumental in helping me in my creative development that year, was a lifelong lover of the theater, one of the best teachers I've ever had, and just so happened to be transferring to John Baptist as head of their theater program the following year. Oh, the sad irony is there could have been a chance that I would have been able to pursue this thing that gave me so much confidence, drive, and direction with a teacher who really supported me, who understood me, but because of my grades from the year before, I was not going to be able to attend a program that I was so obviously suited for. Felt like I was being punished for the performance of my past self. A kid who didn't know who he was, what he was interested in, or why he was in school to begin with. I watched everything that made my 8th grade year special, everything that made me stand out in a positive light, just kind of vanish. Now, I'm not telling you this story to lay the blame of my unfulfilled dreams entirely at the feet of the compulsory school system, and I certainly do not tell you this story today to absolve myself of any of my own personal choices. As we are all aware, a human life is constructed from a limitless amount of variables and conditions, and no single event or even series of experiences can account for where a person is in their life. However, I think we can all agree that school, in theory, is meant to give young people tools to discover what interests them and help them be successful in adulthood. What I seem to have experienced is less of a person giving me a toolbox and showing me how to use the tools inside, and more like someone giving me access to a few tools for a limited amount of time and then chucking them into the woods and telling me to go find them and build a house. By the time I got into the woods, I had pretty much forgotten what I was doing out there in the first place. I had become convinced that my high school was not going to be able to accommodate my needs. For the next 3 years, I was in survival mode, desperate to regain any of that acceptance and positivity I had felt in 8th grade. I never was able to find a reliable outlet for my time at Boulder High. I had a few promising leads. I joined the dramatic interpretation club and learned to do a mean telltale heart, played Renfield in a completely student-organized production of Dracula. But all of these interests, like so many subjects in school, allowed me only the most cursory amount of exposure. This system of education we have designed allows one to take a subject only so far because it needs to compete with all the other subjects in the pursuit of creating the well-rounded individual. So without the ability to dive deeply and sincerely into these subjects and activities that interested me, my areas of focus became what was easiest and safest and most of all reliable. My junior year, my areas of study in order of importance were as follows: my girlfriend, my friends, smoking pot, and drawing. Drawing's last. In the 12 years that I was in school, they had told me that my behavior was inappropriate, my time was owed to the institution, and that my interests were not as important as the curriculum the institution provided. The system that I was supposed to be educated in consistently denied me a chance to learn about myself in any in-depth or meaningful way, because that system took up all of my time with subjects that were not going to prepare me for the person I was. It was preparing me for a person I was never going to be. And because I resisted and could not play ball, that system spent a lot of time telling me I was failing and could get me extra help, either through special education or special medication. But now I know for certain I was not the problem in school. School was. The school I was in could not serve me, or at the very least was serving me something that I did not need. I don't think the mistakes and failures I made in school would have been so devastating had I been given the opportunity to pursue the subjects I was interested in fully. Had I been able to engage with them in a way that was not superficial, I wouldn't have felt the need to invest so much time and energy in my relationships, or at the very least consider them defining features of my personality. I certainly wouldn't be so bored that I looked for drugs or entertainment. I wouldn't look to drugs for entertainment or self-medication. It was this long, inefficient journey I was hoping to spare my children from. Not that we should avoid journeys of self-discovery, but they shouldn't have to lead to dead ends. And when we encounter bad actors on these journeys, we should feel empowered and supported to say, this isn't working. This isn't the direction I want to be going. We wanted our kids' childhood to be directed by their own interests and desires. So in order to do that, Katie and I considered what life without school would look like. Three things happened that led us to unschooling. Katie was laid off. We discovered the word unschooling and COVID. In 2018, Story was 3 and Maren was 1. Katie and I were both working. She had an 8-to-4 career designing children's clothes for a high-end brand, and I had just started my own illustrious career as a bus driver. And life for me turned into working, getting ready to go to work, or sleeping. I didn't know what my shift would be from one day to the next. Sometimes I would come home at 11, sometimes I would come home at 3. Either way, Katie needed to be out the door by 6 or 6:30, and those babies were going to get up shortly before or after, no matter how much sleep I got. Katie was going to work, and those babies were going to wake up. It was hell. I would give anything to do those days over again. I would try to swaddle them back to sleep or walk around like a zombie, going through the motions, seeing to their needs, but not really being with them, just kind of processing them. I had these brand new babies that I had waited my whole life for, and now that they were here, I barely had enough energy to hold them, or time to hold them for that matter. It seemed that most of our life had turned into maintenance. Was this a sign of what was to come? Was this what parenting for the working stiff was like? Getting my children to the appropriate care professionals so I could get to my own profession to earn money to pay the care professionals? They told me we were in it. They told us that this was the hard part and that we would get through it. But I didn't want to endure anything when it came to these babies. I wanted to experience it fully, and fully awake for that matter. I wanted to be in a place where I could enjoy them and not have to worry about how I was going to function the next day. The only reason why I took this mind-numbing job in the first place was to support them. What's the point of working and making all this money if we were just going to pay somebody else to be with our children? When did the act of raising our children become a job best suited for the professionals? When did our society say there were more important things for us to do with our time? Why isn't being a parent and raising good, confident children who will grow up to be smart, productive citizens enough for our society? I don't know. But evidently being a dad is a thing that I do alongside my other jobs. Just like they told me in school, I can't just do this one thing all the time. This was not how we wanted to parent. This was not going to form a deep and meaningful connection with our children. We were working to support our family. We couldn't risk losing a close and meaningful connection with our children because we had to be at work so much. Because from the moment I saw my daughter's long legs kicking and flailing at Katie, I knew this was the rest of my life. The days were numbered, and I was going to be goddamned if I was going to spend a single day trying to get through it, trying to endure it, waiting for it to be over so I could get to some better part. At the children's apparel company that Katie worked for, they laid people off every January. One year it was Katie's turn. They laid her off on her birthday. Turns out it was the best thing that ever happened to us. I don't know if we would have been able to gather up the courage to go to a single person income if that hadn't happened. But we made adjustments, we received many blessings, and Marin, who still needed his mom so much, could be back with her full time. Story, who really did seem to like her daycare, was able to stay for a bit longer with a very generous scholarship to account for our income being cut in half. Around this time, Story was getting ready for kindergarten, and there were some growing concerns about her ability to self-advocate. She has always enjoyed alone time from the beginning, whether at home or at daycare. Story spent a lot of her time quietly sitting, looking at books, or deep in pretend play. Her voice is not always the loudest one in the room, and she has always taken her time when approaching things that are new. Katie had a hard time envisioning Story sitting at that little desk surrounded by all those voices without the ability to choose, and her success contingent on her ability to use a loud voice. Katie knew from her own experience that a quiet voice will earn you your teacher's favor, but often leaves one overlooked while the lion's share of the teacher's time goes to the loudest ones. Lisa, our daycare provider, was one of Story's first friends and advocates outside our home. She agreed that Story could benefit from another year before starting kindergarten, so we made plans to keep Story at Roots to Bloom for one more year with the intention of starting kindergarten the next. But the next year, COVID happened. We watched as public schools shifted and contorted themselves in ways to accommodate students in a way the school system was not built for. We saw that space our daughter would have to occupy soon look even more stark and lonely than before. Masking, social distancing, no touching. This did not seem like a very hopeful way to start your first year at school. Then classes via video calls for 5-year-olds. What are you guys talking about? It just seemed the world was so desperate to hold on to this system that was clearly not working. If we weren't going to go to school, why did we need to pretend that we were? We decided to pull Story from daycare and just endure the storm and send her to school whenever this thing was over. But Katie was still having trouble seeing what school would look like for Story. During her time at home, Katie and I had reflected a lot about closeness and how good it felt to have the kids here with us. How the simplicity of this life brought us peace from having to run all over the place to make sure the kids were getting a proper education and were well-rounded and had a fulfilling experience. We were constantly talking about our own school experiences that were very different, but both had overwhelming anxiety and trauma. But I was still seeing school as this sacrifice for the greater good. School was just something that you had to do. We all had to do things in this life we didn't want to do. It was best that kids figured this out early, right? Eesh, what a grim assessment. Yeah, this is awful, but we all have to do and be places we don't want to be. Here I had this little girl that to me life didn't really begin until she came into the world, and now literally overnight I was just going to take her from playing on the floor of our home to this big strange building and say, "Goodbye, sweetie. These people will take it from here. Sorry, but we aren't qualified to give you the training you will need for this complex and changing world. Give me a break. Like we have any idea what skills are going to be valued in the future. How many times did a math teacher tell me I wasn't always going to have a computer in my pocket or access to a computer? How much trouble did I get into during English class for talking or trying to make people laugh with my another day at the fishing hole routine? A real hit, by the way. Spoiler alert, my math is no better than it was in 5th grade, and here I am speaking in front of you from a script I wrote myself. If the subject is important to the individual, they will pursue it. If it is not, they won't. Why are we wasting our children's very limited childhood on subjects they are not interested in and making them go to places they don't want to be? One day, Katie was talking to her sister about what life would look like without school. Melinda has been a dedicated elementary school teacher for as long as I've known her, and she is an inspiring mother. She is knowledgeable and wise, and her opinion has always meant a great deal to both of us. Melinda said to Katie something along the lines of, some homeschoolers don't even have a curriculum. They call it unschooling or something. Just one word, like a hot ember being brought back to the cave of a prehistoric family. We laid this idea down, and from that one word, we stoked this idea back to a roaring flame. We read everything we could get our hands on: Peter Gray, John Holt, Carrie McDonald, Sandra Dodd, so many unschooling podcasts. I was put to sleep by the gentle laughing of mothers talking about their children for years. I fell in love with unschooling almost instantly. I did not have to be sold on it. How could this be real? There needed to be a catch. Why wasn't everybody doing this? The principles were so simple, the outcomes were so obvious. It wasn't a lifestyle held for the rich or the elite. Why hadn't I ever heard of this before? Why hadn't I ever met an unschooling person? So I began to think of friends I had a strong admiration for. I had always enjoyed people who were not smothered under the idea of what was the correct way to live a life. People who were not easily embarrassed or were scared to take chances. I admired people who had a clear understanding of who they were and what they wanted. Claire, who dropped out of high school to hike the Appalachian Trail when she was 17. Justin, whose dad showed him how to cultivate hemp to make his own clothing. Crampton, who paddled the Mississippi. Verity, our close family friend, who never went to school and who retains a childlike wonder into her 40s that is truly inspiring. It turned out that throughout my life, I had known a number of unschooled people. They may not have used the word, but the principles were the same. These people were always working on some project or another, and often worked jobs where they were deciding when they would work, for how long, and for what pay. If I had a chance to raise kids that would turn out as happy and brave and confident and wise as these people I knew, I was going to take it. Okay, so now I just want to share with you a few things that I love about unschooling in our family. And I just want to preface this by saying, one of the things that I love about unschooling is that it is different for everybody. So take that with a grain of salt. This is the things, my family, that I love, and sometimes we are right on target, and sometimes we miss it. So sleep. Sleep. There we go. Choosing when they wake up is, to me, one of the greatest gifts this life awards our children. When you create a school system that emulates factory work, you can expect your sleeping routine to be the same. Trying to squeeze in life at the end of the day, knowing that the start time for the next day will remain the same no matter what, has been robbing us of our sleep and meaningful connection with our families probably since the Industrial Revolution began. Creating generations of sleep-deprived children who grow up into sleep-deprived adults. It is just one of the many accepted hardships that come with the institution that have us saying, well, that's just the way it is. Having to get up before you are ready in our family is the exception, not the norm. It hasn't always been pretty or easy. Katie stays with them until they fall asleep every night. I mean, every night these kids have been with us. She has been with them as they fall asleep. There has never been a night that she hasn't. Story has been known to wake up at 4 in the morning and get on her iPad, and there have been plenty of nightmares with hours in bathroom. But no matter how restless we are throughout the night, it simply means we sleep longer in the day. We rarely lose that rest. There is no obligation waiting for them the next day they can't opt out of, no punishment to endure should they choose sleep. Being in a place where the next day's demands are not impeding on sleep allows us more options at night. Options to watch another show if we choose, eat more if we're still hungry after dinner, and most importantly, if there was a problem during the day that warrants discussion, we know there will be time to talk it through when we are ready. We don't have to talk about hard stuff in a rushed or clumsy way because we are trying to prepare for the next day, or worst of all, not address the hard stuff at all. Knowing that our family is going to get their sleep most nights, no matter what the next day has in store, is a freedom families who have enrolled in school rarely enjoy. Now, I wouldn't be completely forthcoming if I failed to mention my own schedule. As I said before, I'm a bus driver, and of course that means that I do have to get up at a certain time. As I've also mentioned, I'm a practicing artist, and for the last year, I've dedicated myself to quite a strict morning routine that affords me about 2 hours of studio time before I go to work. It can be rather tight, and these next day obligations that I have do weigh on me. Sometimes it seems if the slightest thing goes wrong in my nightly routine, we have an obligation at work, or I have an obligation after work, there are some tough emotions to work through, or we just get carried away having fun playing nighttime lurker. I can find myself stressing that I won't have enough time in my studio or I won't get enough sleep. So how does Dad deal with this looming wake-up time when the rest of his family enjoys the morning without an alarm clock? Well, the first is to just breathe. Being able to work in my studio is vital to my well-being and mental health, but it's a luxury, and so it remains flexible. Sometimes it's 2 hours, and sometimes it's a half hour. Knowing that it's there before my workday is huge, and knowing it will be there the day after, and the day after that is even better. No matter what happens the night before, I know that there will be at least some time this week for me to get downstairs into my studio and do the things I need to do. It's not always perfect. Sometimes I get frustrated that I'm still doing dishes at 8:30, or a member of my family is having a hard time and needs help. But I try to remember that tomorrow is just one morning, and if I have to use my studio time to catch up on the sleep that I lost because I had to be available, more studio days are gonna come. One way or another, we all get the sleep we need. We are mostly always rested, and I feel this is just one more way we show our kids that they are in command of their time. It's with rest that their unschooling journey begins. So, seeing. Almost every time that I begin to have fears about this life, when I start to question whether or not the children are getting everything that they need to become well-rounded individuals, I can almost always identify the root cause of that fear, one thing that I am not doing, and that's seeing. Sometimes I can't see because I am too busy working and running errands. Sometimes I don't see because I'm wrapped up in my own interests. And sometimes I don't see because I'm sitting around the table with the other adults while the children are somewhere else playing. All it's seeing is, to me, is just paying attention to what the kids' interests are, recognizing what they are pursuing in a way that is genuine and authentic, not cursory or not genuine. Maybe I would say. Sometimes I will ask myself, what are the kids into right now? Can I answer that? Do I know? Is my answer flippant? Oh, they just watch screens all the time. Not true. Oh, Story loves Adele. Story hasn't loved Adele since she was 4. If I can't speak about their interests with confidence, or my answers are dismissive, I am not paying attention, and I am letting fear assume the worst. Seeing means I am taking the time to understand the importance of the things they are excited about. I believe that when I am seeing the children When I am paying attention to what they are doing, that act alone puts my fears to rest when we're connected. My imagination doesn't wander. I don't see each difficult moment with them as a sign of some larger systemic problem. When I am connected with the kids, they can have a hard time without it being the result of me not providing enough for them. I feel the most successful with our choice to unschool when I see them engaging in materials and subjects that interest them, not when they are following some objective that I've laid out for them, or done well in some game that is designed and orchestrated by adults. It's easy for me to lean into a leadership role, to try to explain the rules of a game or to assume a teacher's position, but I must remember to find a place in this moment as a participant and only a guide when asked to be. That's when connection happens. That's when growth occurs. If I can quiet the noise in my head and stop myself from getting up to go do this or go do that, if I can stop myself from trying to direct the moment, I can see why this thing they are doing is so important to them. And the fears that we aren't doing it right vanish and our connection becomes stronger. Our unschooling life is rather simple. I tend to think that the more simplistic we live, the happier we are. That is easier said than done. We live in a city which is complex to navigate and to survive in. Living in the age of the internet alone brings with it a host of complications for raising children that we are constantly reevaluating and second guessing. We are bombarded by a litany of images and products begging for our attention, promising a happier life, and we are trying to raise compassionate, emotionally intelligent children while passing people on the street every day who are in clear and desperate need of assistance we are not equipped to give them. Despite our best efforts to make things simple, we find ourselves periodically taking inventory and asking, why are things so difficult? And where did all this shit come from? It takes a lot of nuance to differentiate between what is needed and what is wanted, what will be useful and what will pacify. It is the simplicity of unschooling that attracted us to this path of education. In the Knox family, we tend to believe that the simplest solution is usually best. It's better to walk than to drive, better to cook than to go out, better to make than to buy. It's better to provide for yourself than to receive a service. Unschooling allows us to live a simple life. Our obligations are owed mostly to our family, but if we find organizations or clubs that are not meeting our expectations, the kids can just walk away, and they do, without judgment or guilt. As a parent, sometimes it's hard to have these conversations. Boy Scouts was instrumental to my development as a young man, and it was something that I really wanted our children to engage in. But after a year of us all trying to make it work, it proved to be something the kids were just not excited about. We had to sit down and have a serious conversation about leaving. I'm constantly being reminded that just because something works for me, or just because something worked for me in my childhood, that same thing is not necessarily going to work for my kids and theirs. Living simply and slowly gives us all time to reflect on how we want to spend our time. It is truly a gift. We didn't choose this path because we think that we're smarter than teachers. We don't hate school, and we know that we do not have all the answers. We understand that in order for our kids to pursue their interests, we will need to introduce them to the masters of those skills and are willing to spend the extra effort to make connections with those teachers. What appealed to us about this unschooling journey is its focus on giving children a choice, not in a fast food menu way or Netflix streaming service where one is crippled under endless options. No, the choice this life provides reveals itself when children explore the world in their own way, on their own time, while we recognize those interests and guide our children to places and people that can help them develop those skills to whatever level of mastery our children choose. Let me just say that one more time. The choice this life provides reveals itself when children explore the world in their own way, on their own time, while we recognize those interests and guide our children to places and people that can help them develop those skills to whatever level of mastery our children choose. To us, it is vital that they see their interests. To us, it is vital that they see their interests are valuable and we respect their decision to pursue them. From an early age, we are told that we have responsibilities and that our time is owed to a spectrum of people and institutions. Now is the time to eat, now is the time to sleep, now is the time to be close, grandma is picking you up, you're starting school tomorrow. I remember learning to watch the clock from an early age in elementary school, waiting for the day to be over so I could get back to being a kid and doing what kids do. The excitement of the weekend and the glory of summer vacation, all of these special moments that make a kid's life seem so magical, only exist because of what's been taken away. I would gladly trade all of my weekends and summer vacations for a childhood of self-directed play and exploration with my friends. So here I am, from an early age, conditioned to endure, to be okay with sitting in a place I didn't want to be, waiting for the chance to be who I was. And that's the way it has been for most of us, for most of our lives. Learning to be okay with sitting and waiting so that when we grow up, we are paid to be in a place we would rather not be. It's not a concept that is totally foreign to us. After all, we've been sitting in places we would rather not be since we were kids. But what if we didn't? What if since childhood we had been choosing what our day looked like? What if we got to pursue our own interests and were not forced to do things that did not interest us? Furthermore, what if the adults in our lives showed only genuine excitement and support for those interests and accomplishments, never asking us to qualify our interests or completing a task or filling out a form? What if we never had to prove it? Would those children, when growing up, be okay with sitting and waiting for a better day? Wouldn't those children recognize this job for what it was, a waste of their time and energy? You see, they had never had to settle in childhood. They were never told that their interests were less than the desires of the system of the adults. They lived in a community where they were not seen as empty vessels that needed to be filled by the wisdom of their superiors, but instead were gifts who, if allowed to grow and play, would reveal their talents and their importance. Katie and I began to see how little we ask these very capable young humans what they want. In school, they try to give you choices, but they are serving so many children that not all of them get to be awarded this luxury. So only the ones that stand out for good or for bad get the choice. I got choices because I was disruptive. Chris, why don't you just go back there and play with those toys? Because I was talented. Chris, would you like to be Beauty, or would you like to be Beast and Beauty and the Beast? Those that follow the rules and stay in their seats, well, they stay in their seats. Those little guys, blah, blah, blah. Comes out, tells you you don't have much time. He comes out, tells you you don't have much time. Tells you to act accordingly. Blah, blah, blah. Our time here is a flash. We are a blooming flower in time lapse. Each individual a momentary expression of a species that is still in its infancy compared to other life forms. And here we are, we have our children, not even 10, waiting for the day to get over so they can start getting back to the business of living and learning. But we all have to do things we don't want to do, Chris. Sure, writing this was difficult. Hunting an animal for dinner is hard. Building a house is a challenge. But the things in our life that are difficult should not have to be amended with, you'll need this later. That is an arbitrary hardship, a constructed challenge that seems to validate a set of tests that people who have committed their lives to a subject have proclaimed are important. Well, of course it's important to them. Ask a butcher the importance of meat in one's diet. Ask a baker how bread can change the world. Ask a bus driver the importance of having your fare ready before you get on the bus. But I'm not going to teach my 5-year-old how to transfer from the 75 to the 4 at Interstate Transit Center because studies show that 5-year-olds are capable and that they might need this later. We see how unschooling helps our children to figure out real problems that are happening right now, that require them to develop skills in this moment, like advocating for themselves when an injustice has occurred, or knowing the difference between how an alligator walks to how a crocodile walks so that they can portray it correctly in pretend play. We don't have to create arbitrary problems for them to solve and try to convince them that these problems are important. Children are masters at finding problems to solve, and within those self-directed problems lay the answers to all the subjects we have been taught are so important. Our children don't need us to dictate to them, they need us to guide and to advocate and be excited about the problems that they are solving. This is why the Knox is unschooled. We want to give them time to master their interests. We want them to know that no matter what their community looks like, no matter what their society is telling them is important, they are the keepers of their own time, and they owe it to no one. We want them to be able to explore their interests fully without dead ends or false starts. We want to provide them with a place where they can focus on the actual study and practice of the subject that interests them, not focus or get distracted by a system that is meant to support those subjects. We unschool so our children can grow at their own pace. We unschool to give our children time. Time to sleep, time to see, and time to be simple. And by giving them this, we get a front row seat to it all, never having to wonder how the day went, never having to poke and prod for information that will soothe our fears and anxieties. We unschool so that we can be with them in a meaningful way. We unschool to be closer to our kids. Thank you. Thank you.